to all of you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. As Erin said, my name is Brynna Golden and I go to College of the Atlantic. I'm a senior. And College of the Atlantic, everyone studies the same degree, human ecology, but within that I focus on environmental law and policy and conservation. So getting this opportunity to work with these two groups this summer was really great, and I appreciate my time with them very much. So I want to just give you a little background on these two organizations. Erin gave you a little summary of my work this summer. My two supervisors were Erin Doherty and Frank Dorsey, and it was wonderful working with both of them. So this was a 10-week internship, and within the 10 weeks I split my time between the two organizations. And I do want to just quickly introduce you to the mission statement of both groups. Frenchman Bay Conservancy's mission is to build lasting relationships and commitments that conserve the distinctive landscapes and natural resources of the Frenchman Bay and the Union River watersheds. And the mission of Friends of Taunton Bay is to understand and promote the health and integrity of the Taunton Bay ecosystem. So both of these groups have very similar goals, and they work within the same body of water, in the same watershed. But I ended up actually doing very different projects for both groups, which was really great because I got to focus on many different things. So I just want to start off with talking about my work with the Frenchman Bay Conservancy and focusing on the Hancock rail bed. I promise this picture is a lot more beautiful on the computer. I think the color is a little off on the projector there. But so as Erin said, I spent my summer exploring the possibility of connecting existing public access routes along the old Hancock railbed, which was owned by the Maine Central Railroad. One thing that we really want to point out that we discovered very early on is that there is no deeded access or any remaining right-of-way along the rail at all. So this means that any future public access would require voluntary permission from all of the landowners along the rail for this to happen. So that's why my work was focused on talking to all of these landowners to try and get a general consensus of what everyone thought about the idea and get suggestions and hear people's concerns. So one of the reasons why we're interested in the trail here is because it actually goes right by the Frenchman Bay Conservancy headquarters. It actually crosses right over there on the other side of the bridge, goes across Route 1 and extends down past Tidal Falls and then ends at Hancock, ends in Hancock at McNeil Point. And so that's one of the reasons why we're interested in the rail. It would be great to have a trail near Frenchman Bay Conservancy, but also we're interested in this because it's a really important historical landmark on both a statewide scale and a local scale. So I just want to talk briefly about history. I'm sorry, but so this line was run by the Maine Central Railroad. This railroad also ran a train called the Bar Harbor Express, which specifically brought tourists in to MDI. They would board a ferry at the point at the end of the rail line and then go spend the summer in MDI. So this rail was built in the 19th century, and the ferry leaving from Hancock Point to Bar Harbor began running in 1884. So this is really important because it really helped make Maine the tourist destination it is today, specifically Bar Harbor and MDI. There were many notable people who rode the train and who rode this line. As you can see, this is a picture, a rear photo of President Taft's locomotive. And many of the notable people who rode this train had their own train cars or their own locomotives, including the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Fords, and other presidents and vice presidents as well. So it's really interesting historically, and even in 1917 you could leave Washington, D.C. in the evening and be in MDI in the morning the next day. And I don't know if that's even possible today. That's pretty amazing. So this train brought early tourists, known as the rusticators, to Maine. And it wasn't only important because of tourism, it was important on a local scale I've talked to many locals about this as well, people who remember the rail or have family members who remember the rail. That you could take the local train all over Maine and go to college and attend school in other towns and then come back home in the same day, which was really great for expanding people's horizons in this area of Maine. And you could also take a day trip to Boston. It was also important for produce. There were lots of refrigerator cars that brought fresh produce to and from Maine. For example, people would pick strawberries here in the morning and put them on the train, and then they would be sold in Boston the very same day. So you can see why this is really historically significant, and this is one of the reasons why we are very interested in this trail. Here are some more lovely photos, courtesy of Hancock Historical Society and the Down East Scenic Railroad site. Very bad quality, but you can see the ferry terminal here from the water, and also on the bottom from the land you can see the tracks and the station. So this didn't last forever, the golden days of the railroad. Automobiles were allowed on MDI in 1920 for the first time, and then the causeway to the mainland opened in 1931. And combined with the effects of the Great Depression at this time, the railroad really couldn't survive this. So in 1931, the ferry service ended to Bar Harbor, and the line was cut back from the point to Sullivan Bridge right here, actually, where a feed and hardware store was operated for many years. And then the line was again cut back to the tannery on Route 1 and the junction of Route 1 and 182, and was again operated as a freight train for several years until it was finally cut back to Washington Junction. So this is McNeil Point today. You remember the picture we just saw, and it's very different. There's almost no sign of the railroad here, which is one of the reasons why I was so interested in this. The rail has almost completely disappeared, and the actual bed is one of the only things remaining. Besides, there's a large turntable as well, which is pretty cool. And some pieces of metal and rail ties that can be found around. But there's really not much left of this really significant railroad. And so a public walking trail would be a really great thing to have here to sort of help preserve this history, because it's something that's quickly fading and has already faded quite a lot. So we originally envisioned our project on a much larger scale. We were hoping to focus on the trail from McNeil Point down here in the blue all the way up to Washington Junction in the purple, and it's a very large stretch actually. So we realized after doing a lot of research that this wasn't quite feasible in the near future. And I'd also like to thank Eileen Bader for her help with creating this wonderful GIS map. I would not have been able to do it without her. And so you can see here we encountered many issues, including crossing Route 1 3 times. The trail crosses in red. You can see the tiny dots there are the 3 crossings, and that's sort of a logistics issue. It'd be hard to get funding to have some sort of crosswalk or traffic light put in, so that was something that made us sort of step back a bit. And when the rail bed was cut back, it was sold off into individual pieces, as many of you know, so they're all owned by individual landowners outright. This means that there are in total along this entire stretch 51 landowners, so that's a lot to coordinate. So that was another reason we wanted to sort of scale back. There are also some positives that we found. For example, the green here, might not be able to see the difference much between the yellow, but that's the Old Pond Railway, and that is actually currently a public access trail that used to be a railway as well. Mr. Samus was a landowner who bought that entire stretch and actually operated his own personal rail car into the 1980s. That's why there's still some more visible signs of the rails there, because they were used much more recently. And then there's also the purple stretch you can see up in the corner. This is a really important section. It was actually owned by Maine Central Railroad for quite a while, and it's still owned by a railroad. The Guilford Transportation Independent bought this section from Maine Central Railroad, and then they became the Pan Am Railways, and they are currently operating trains throughout North America still, and we've actually begun communicating with them, trying to find out what their ideas for this section of the trail might be in the future. So that's been a good opportunity as well. There are also some houses on the rail beds, and that's something else that's sort of an obstacle to deal with. There are multiple houses, and so you don't really want people walking through your living room when they're trying to hike. So that's another issue that we have to work around if this project ever came to fruition. And so basically after all of this, we realized we had to narrow the scope of the project quite a bit, and perhaps tackle the rest of it far in the future. So we began focusing on this blue part down here in the corner, the part that extends to McNeil Point. This is the FBC focal area, and you can see it closer up here, although this projector is not great. Basically all the landowner names are along this line, and the rail starts at the road that leads to Tidal Falls and then extends down to McNeil Point. And one of the positive things about this is that FBC already has 2 conservation easements on parcels along this trail. This doesn't mean there's public access. They're not public access easements, but this just is a good sign that we already have some good connections with people who live along the rail. And so I began meeting with people who had helped with other public access trails around Maine, like the Down East Sunrise Trail and the Old Pond Railway, and that was really helpful to talk to people and get some suggestions about moving forward. And it was also really great to start meeting with the landowners and start trying to figure out their general consensus and opinion of the project. And the meetings were generally very positive. And that doesn't mean that everybody agreed. That just means that everybody I talked to, even those who did not support the ideas, were still open and willing to talk to me about their position and concerns and give suggestions, which was really great, because going into this we knew that no one would share the same opinion. There was going to be a lot of different ideas going on, but it was really a wonderful surprise to have such good interactions with everyone. So I really enjoyed talking to the landowners. And many shared similar concerns. One of the greatest concerns was worries about motorized vehicles using the trail, and this is something we tried to emphasize when talking to people, that we have no interest in creating any kind of public access trail for motorized vehicles. It would be for foot traffic only, but these concerns are very valid because there's been many issues in the past with motorized vehicles using this trails in these areas and disrupting homeowners and people on their private property. So that is something to consider. There are also some concerns about privacy and private property and people walking. But there was also a lot of excitement and support for this idea, and that was really great to see, and I really appreciated people's ideas. There were also a lot of positive opportunities here. We realized the trail is actually very well maintained, so that if the landowners ever decided that they wanted or were interested in pursuing some kind of public access, there wouldn't be much work to do in the area of trail maintenance. It's a really beautiful walk. And last of all, even if all the landowners agreed right now to create a trail, there's still a lot of work to be done. This is just in the very beginning phases of exploring this possibility. We still haven't found many of the contact information for some of the landowners, so we still don't know everyone's opinion yet. And there's also other issues like people's houses on the rail and fallen out bridges and things like that. So this was a really great jumping off point, and I was really happy to be able to start this project. It was a lot of fun, and I'm also putting together all of my notes and information to leave Frenchman Bay Conservancy with, so if anyone wants to pursue the project in the future, they will have all the work I've done already. And I briefly just wanted to talk about the other work I did with FBC, which basically I got to learn how a nonprofit land trust works, and that was really fun. I got to go on a lot of monitoring trips with Aaron, and I got to talk to a lot of different landowners and go to meetings, and I actually learned the most from watching Aaron, Eileen, and Joyce, the rest of our lovely office, working. It was really great working with all of them. So, I would like to move on to my work with Friends of Taunton Bay after I hydrate. So, this project was very different from the last project. The last project was very focused. The rail trail was one specific thing to work on. But with Friends of Taunton Bay, I got to work on a bunch of projects in and around the bay that were sort of connected by monitoring and assessing the health of the bay. And these projects are really important because they can be continued in the future to continue monitoring the health of the bay. So it was really great to begin these projects this summer. There was also an educational component, which I will talk about. And I began the summer helping Frank Dorsey with his horseshoe crab monitoring, and that was a really great way to get my foot in the door, look at data collection and recording. I hadn't done much of that before, and I got to go and paddle around the point in Hog Bay and observe horseshoe crabs mating and record the numbers and everything like that. And this is very significant because this is the northernmost population of horseshoe crabs, as I'm sure all of you have heard from Frank before, and it's a very important population to keep an eye on, and so his yearly records are really important. I also helped out with camp here. There are 2 summer camps that Friends of Taunton Bay runs every summer, and this year was insects, and it was a lot of fun. I'll talk briefly about it later. It was great working with lovely Lisa Harrington over here. And then the other work I did was conducting surveys here at Gordon's Wharf. There were multiple surveys. They were sort of a continuation of the work the intern from last year did, Tyler Prest, who's also from COA. He began doing some work here, and I basically added on to that. And so the surveys are vertical species abundance, mud quadrat survey, an erosion survey, and then I also did sort of a separate project involving culverts in Franklin, and also looked at some bridges on Route 200, and got to do some flow meter monitoring as well after large weather events. So I'll talk about all of those in more detail. So the surveys I did here at Gordon's Wharf this is all the first year we're doing them, so this data is really the first in a set that will be able to tell us a story over time. We'll be able to see if there's any changes if we do this year to year. So although what I collected this year doesn't really tell us much except what's there, in the future it'll be more meaningful. And I took very detailed notes and metadata and methods so that anyone can repeat my study in following years after I'm gone. And just a little brief summary of what Tyler did. He performed a species abundance survey, but he just looked at common and uncommon on the wharf. So we wanted to focus more and actually get some numbers and look at more specific areas. He also did a species list, and we wanted to focus more on specific things, so we just updated that and looked at other areas. So first of all, I did the erosion study. That was actually the most recent study I did with the help of Frank. Would not have been able to do it alone. Measuring is very difficult alone. We set up down by the shore here on the north side of the wharf a transect line, and then measured 6 marks from there to evaluate the amount of erosion. And of course this year we can't tell how much has eroded, but we were very specific about our measurements, so going forward we can see even like an inch difference in the mud layer. We measured the upper mud layer that has this, I should have put a picture here, but it has a light green algae on it and then breaks off to just plain mud, so it's very clear where the line is. And this erosion is a sign of green crab activity, so that can be important going forward, seeing how much increase or decrease in green crabs there might be. We also did a vertical species abundance study, and what that means is we used the granite sections on the wharf as quadrats and took percentages of species we found on those rocks and wrote them down and marked the rocks so they can be measured yearly and people can see if that has changed. Also, we did a quadrat mud study, and I must thank Chris Peterson for coming to help me with that. I'm not very experienced with conducting studies on my own, so that was really helpful. We laid out a transect in the mud, again on the north side of the wharf, and measured the species on 5 separate quadrats along an 86-foot transect, and we measured the number, we took the number of species on the surface level and in the lower mud level as well. So you can see here, this is a photo on the left of Chris and some students helping me. That's our transect line. We're doing the mud quadrat survey. And that is a clamworm in Chris's hand. And here on the bottom, we have a section of the wharf. And so we basically just took a vertical section of those granite pieces and looked at each one individually. So another part of my work involved culverts in Franklin, and this was another way we monitored the health of the bay by looking at freshwater inflows and the culverts that support them. And there are some issues and problems with culverts in this area. For example, some are perched, some are rusting out, causing flaws in the road surface above and possibly impeding fish migration, issues with water quality, and we were lucky to collaborate with the Downey Salmon Federation and Dwayne Shaw. He helped us decide which culverts were important to look at, so that was really helpful. So these are 2 culverts that I ended up focusing on. These are located on South Bay Road, and unfortunately you can't see, but the upper 2 photos are maps of where they are, but they're on South Bay Road and they flow into Hog Bay. So Lenny's Forks, you can see on the left there, is actually a very new culvert, but it is perched, which means it's up above the water level, and I came at high tide and low tide and after extreme weather events to look at these culverts, and there was never a time when they were submerged or on the same level as the water below, so that's an issue for fish passage. And also, this previous picture is a photo of the road above that culvert, Lenny's Forks. So this is a new culvert and it's already caused a lot of issues in the road above. You can see they've tried to patch it, but it's caused a large pothole there. If you've ever driven on that road, you may know what I'm talking about. The second culvert we looked at was Frank Joy Brook. And again, this culvert is perched, although you can't see it, it's on the other side, but maybe you can see in this photo that the whole bottom of this culvert has rusted out, which is a huge problem, not only for supporting the road above, but for large weather events, the water won't go through the culvert, it'll just kind of like flow around it and then cause more problems and erosion. So these are both problem culverts for fish passage and for road maintenance and any large rain events. So I wrote a report on our observations here, and we are planning on sending it to the Franklin Town Roads Commission, and hopefully they will plan to replace culverts. It's more cost effective to put in well-functioning culverts than to keep fixing culverts that are not functioning properly. So another thing I looked at briefly was the Franklin Main Route 200 bridges, and you probably can't see in this photo, it's more clear on my computer, but there's a lot of cracks in the upper cement part of this bridge, and there's some erosion at the base, and this isn't an immediate problem, but this is something that is important to take note of. This is an important stream for fish as well, and of course the road is important above it. So we are also sending just a short report about our observations here to the Maine DOT as well. And last of all, I just wanted to show you briefly Insect Camp, which is, we run it here. There I am educating. It's wonderful. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great break from all the academic work to just run around here with a bunch of kids and play with bugs. It was a really great camp. And thank you. Yeah, it was. You're right. It was very academic, but I knew everything already, so it wasn't that hard. Not at all. I learned a lot actually about insects. And thank you again to Lisa for running that. It was really great working with her. And yeah, so what I learned from this internship was not what I expected. It was really great. I thought it was going to be like getting coffee for people and doing like really specific, like mind-numbing tasks that I didn't even know what they were for. But I'm so grateful for the supervision I had. Frank and Aaron were wonderful supervisors. They gave a good amount of guidance when I needed it, but there was no hand-holding or like peering over my shoulder. They would tell me what they wanted, and then I would go figure out how to do it or not figure out how to do it and then ask them. But it was really great. It made me be very self-reliant and independent, and did a lot of problem solving and learning quickly. Had to learn how to keep very detailed record of my work and how I record data. And what you guys next year should put on the internship application that you need to be able to drive on dirt roads and play in the mud and bushwhack as requirements. I had a lot of fun doing all of those. And I also want to thank Chris Peterson and Ken Klein for all their help. I would not have found out about this internship if it wasn't for them. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it tonight. They're my COA advisors, but they've been very helpful throughout all of this. And I also just want to thank Lisa, Alan, Eileen, and Joyce for being very helpful throughout this whole thing. And also thank Frank and Aaron for being wonderful supervisors. I have one thing real quick. I also do pottery on my free time, so I just wanted to give you guys. Yeah.
Where's your coffee?
Sorry.